Reading through the Bible in 1 year, January 13th. This is Genesis 17, Nehemiah 2:9 through 3:13, Matthew 12:1 through 22, and Acts 10:1 through 33. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make a covenant between me and you and multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father over a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but you shall be called Abraham. For I have made you father of a multitude of nations. Now Abraham means father of multitude. No longer shall your name be called, I did that one. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations, from an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my commandment. You shall keep my covenant. You and your offspring and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. That's an outward sign of something that took place. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both he who is born in your house, and he who is bought with your money shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And God said to Abraham, As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name, which means princess. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations, and kings of peoples shall come from her. Then Abraham, pretty sure he had the same struggle then too. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. God said, No, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, which means laughter, or he laughs. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you, and behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. When he had finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. Then Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those who were born in his house or bought with his money, every male among the among the men of Abraham's house. And he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day. For God had said to him, as God had said to him. Now, Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very day, Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised. And all the men of his house, those born in his house and those bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Let's go to Nehemiah. So then this is Nehemiah, came to the governors of that province beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. These are the letters that said that he had authority to be there. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. So I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one of what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. And I went out from there by night to the valley of the dragon, by the valley gate to the dragon spring and to the dung gate. And I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down, and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall, and I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. But I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, and the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision." And I told them of the hand of my God that had been on me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, "Let us rise up and build." So they strengthened their hands for the good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, "What is this that you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" Then I replied to them, "The God of heaven will make us prosper. We are his servants." Telling you, one of these days. "And we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem." When Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brothers, the priests, and they built. So then Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brothers, the priests, and they built the sheep gate, and consecrated it and set its doors. They consecrated as far as the Tower of the 100, as far as the Tower of Hananel. And next to him, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zachar, the son of Imri, built. The sons of Hassanah built the fish gate. They laid its beams and set its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And next to them, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired. And next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, son of Meshezabel, there we go, repaired. And next to them, Zadok, son of Baana, repaired. And next to them, the Tekoites repaired. But their nobles would not stoop to serve their Lord. To serve their Lord. There we go. Capital L. They were too high up. They couldn't serve God. Jehoiada, the son of Paseah, and Meshullam, the son of Besoiada, repaired the gate of Yeshana, which means, or of the old city. They laid its beams and set its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And next to them repaired Mela the Gibeonite and Jadon the Meronothite, the men of Gibeon and of Mizpah, and the seat of the governor of the province beyond the river. Next to them, Uzziel, the son of Hariah, there we go, goldsmiths repaired. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, repaired. And they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Next to them, Raphiah, the son of Hur, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, repaired. Next to them, Jediah, the son of Harumaph, repaired the opposite his house. And next to him, Hattush, the son of Hashabneah, repaired. Melchijah, the son of Harim, and Hashub, the son of Mahath Moab, repaired another section, in the Tower of the Ovens. Next to him, Shallum, the son of Halohesh, ruler of the half district of Jerusalem, repaired, he and his daughters. Hanun and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. They rebuilt it and set its doors, its bolts, its bars, and repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall, as far as the dung gate. Yeah, okay, we'll go over more of that tomorrow. Let's go through Matthew now. So at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. This is a common thing Jesus was doing. He was doing things on the Sabbath, mostly to show that, first off, he's the Lord of the Sabbath, and second, that the Sabbath wasn't something that was made to control people. It was a blessing. It was a time for them to rest and trust in the work that God has done for them, that God will continue to take care of them. That's the role of the Sabbath, is that we just trust in him. Now, we as Christians, Jesus the Christ is our Sabbath rest. We take our rest in him and him alone because he's the one who's done all the work on our behalf. There's no reason for us to do any other work because he has done it for us. So every day for a Christian, we are taking our Sabbath rest in Christ when we cease from doing work to save ourselves, and instead we trust in God to do what he's going to do. That's the Sabbath in a nutshell. All right, let's continue on. So at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what was not lawful to do on the Sabbath." They were working. Because they were taking these, you may have seen wheat, right? They were taking the little heads of grain on the wheat, and they were plucking it off and eating it. Well, according to the sabbatical rules handed down through the priests, that's work. How dare you do any work on the Sabbath? This is violating the fourth commandment, which if you notice, when we get to the fourth commandment, we'll read it together and we'll see it. You know what? Let's go for a walk here. Behold, the 10 Commandments. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. All of these are, all those prior. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall make no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself the carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Honor your father and mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness or lie against your neighbor. And do not covet. Coveting is basically not trusting God for the provisions that he's given you because you want someone else's provisions. You know, you don't have, a brand new Porsche, but your neighbor does, or someone in the church does. And you're like, oh man, why don't I have one of those? It's coveting. Trust God to give you what you need. If he gives you the provisions that you need so that you can buy one of those, cool, go for it. But don't want what someone else has because you think that you're entitled to it. That's what coveting is. All right. But if you notice, all of these here have direct commands. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. So do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. And above this, do not have any other gods before me. Do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or is in the water underneath the earth. We'll get into all of that later on. But all of these things have very direct, specific commands. Which one doesn't? 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. All right. On it, you shall do no work on the 6th day, right? On the 7th day, it's Sabbath to the Lord. Just don't do any work. The point of this is that we learn to rest. It's not just for our benefit. It is, but so that we don't work ourselves to death. But also, the point of it is to trust in God for his provision. Trust in God for his ability to take care of your needs. That's what this is. And we're trusting in God because he is our Sabbath rest. All right, let's go back to the text. So they're mad because his disciples are working on the Sabbath. And he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? And those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. Or have you not read in the law how the Sabbath and the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? They don't take any guilt for when they work in the temple on the Sabbath, right? Why is it okay for them to work? Or why was it okay for King David, whom they all revered as the greatest king of all of Israel history? And I'd say he rightly was. Right? So it's okay for him to do it, but it's not okay for other people to do it. He's pointing out their hypocrisy. I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Now this note right here, We're going to go into this really quick. Okay, so the Son of Man has received dominion over creation and redemption. So he has dominion over the Sabbath, the sign of God's sovereignty in creation and redemption. Again, I'm reading the notes from the Reformed Study Bible here. The claims Jesus makes here, as well as his disregard of the rabbinic tradition and his practice, undoubtedly shock the Pharisees, furthering their resolve to kill him. The note on the ESV Study Bible is very similar. Jesus did not challenge the Sabbath law itself, but rather the Pharisees' interpretation of it. He's going after the hypocrisy. As Messiah, Jesus authoritatively interprets every aspect of the law. Right? We saw that before. This is what he's continuing to do. He is God in the flesh, and he's redefining the law for them for what it really is. And here it points out that the Pharisees' blindness to the actual intent of the Sabbath to bring rest and well-being. This final argument in response to the Pharisees' challenge is the decisive argument. I lost my spot. Gonna be one of these days. The decisive argument that because of who Jesus is, he alone has the authority to interpret the law. All right, let's go on. You're going to see this happen quite a bit. So he went on from there and entered the synagogue. And a man was there with a withered hand. And they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So that they might accuse him. Because again, that's work, right? If anything's a work, healing somebody, that must take a lot of work. So that they might accuse him, they're asking this. And he said to them, which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, right, the thing's going to die, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Well, according to their own laws, that's work. Lifting a sheep? No, that's absolutely work. Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? Right? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Here he is, as the Lord of the Sabbath, as God in the flesh, redirecting them back to the fact that the Sabbath was created for us. Right? It's something that we use to worship God with, but it's a rest for us. That's the whole point of this. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And as the man stretched it out, it was restored, healthy like the other. But the Pharisees, only finding the thing that they wanted to see, ignoring everything else took place, went out and conspired against him and how to destroy him. Because how dare he criticize their special rules? All right. So aware of this, Jesus withdrew from there, and many followed him, and he healed them all and ordered them not to make him known. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, with whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. And he will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory. And in his name the Gentiles will hope. Let's go to Acts 10. At Caesarea, as a quick note here, this story gets repeated twice. There are minor differences in the way that it's repeated. We'll go into a little bit of that. Just know that the reason why it's repeated, first, we actually see what happened. We see that there were witnesses, people of the Jewish Christian faith, the Christian faith who were Jews. They were there present to see what happened. And then later on, when he explains it, he's explaining it to all of the people in the, I don't know what you call it, the upper echelon of the Christian church at the time, the Council of Elders, if you want to call it that. So he's explaining it to them as well, but he's specifically talking to the party of the circumcision. These are people who are Christians who are basically saying that you have to follow all of the Mosaic laws in order to be a true Christian. We have people who do that today, the Hebrew Roots movement and other things. It's bad juju. It's legalism. Legalism is where you take something that your conscience is bound on, right? Let's say that your conscience is saying that, you know, for you personally, smoking was something you did for years and years and years, right? But when God saved you, He revealed to you that smoking was an idol in your life. You formed your day around it. You long for the day for your first smoke. You would plan out in advance when you were going places when you could stop and have a smoke, and then you looked forward to the last smoke before you went to bed. I know this because that's the person I was. So when I first became saved, it was a problem for me when I would reach out to other people and tell them that, how dare you smoke? That's a sin. No, it was a sin for me. It wasn't a sin for them. God hadn't pressed on their heart yet to make it a sin for them. Therefore, I was being a legalist by taking something that God had pressed on my heart and something that God had started to tell me to go and fix, and then forcing it on other people. And that's what was happening. So we're going to go into some of that in a minute here, but let me go ahead and just get started. Now that comes later. We're probably going to go over it tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go over that tomorrow. That's this section down here. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right. Anyway, let's see what happened. So first, at Caesarea, there's a man named Cornelius, a centurion of what was known as the Italian cohort, a devout man who feared God with all his household and gave alms generously to all the people, and prayed continually to God. About the 9th hour of the day, which is, remember, if you look at the clock, right, 6 a.m. starts the day, 9 o'clock is the 3rd hour, 6 is noon, right, and then back around that the 9th hour would be 3 o'clock. Right, that's basically the way to see it. So at the 9th hour, that means at 3 p.m., he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God come in and say to him, Cornelius. And he stared at him in terror and said, "What is it, Lord?" And he said to him, "Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now, send men to Joppa and bring one Simon who is called Peter. He is lodging with one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea." When the angel who spoke to him had departed, he called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier among those who attended him. And having related everything to them, he sent them to Joppa immediately. The next day, as they were on their journey approaching the city, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour, so noon, and he became hungry. In the Greek, it's lunchtime, and he wanted something to eat. But while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance, and he saw the heavens open and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its 4 corners upon the earth. And in it there were all kinds of animals and reptiles and birds of the air. And there came a voice to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is uncommon or unclean." And the voice came to him again a second time, "What God has made clean, do not call common." This happened 3 times, and the thing was taken up at once into heaven. Now, while Peter was inwardly perplexed as to what the vision he had seen might mean, behold, the men who were sent by Cornelius, having made inquiry for Simon's house, stood at the gate and called out to whether Simon, who was called Peter, was lodging there. And while Peter was pondering the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Behold, 3 men are looking for you. Rise and go down and accompany them without hesitation, for I have sent them." Now, that without hesitation doesn't mean immediately. It means just go and do it. Don't ask questions. Don't worry about it. Just go with them. And Peter went down to the men and said, "I am the one you're looking for. What is the reason for your coming?" They said, "Cornelius, a centurion," again, Gentile, right? An upright and God-fearing man who is well spoken of by the whole Jewish nation, was directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house and to hear what you have to say. So he invited them in to be his guests. The next day, he arose and went with them. And some of the brothers from Joppa, these are the Jewish converted Christians, as the converted Christians who were Jews, you know what I mean. And on the following day, they entered Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. And when Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up. I too am a man." See what's going on here? He's refusing worship. This is Peter. one who the Catholics call the first pope. Yep. Okay. And as he talked with them, he went in and found many persons gathered, and he said to them, "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or to visit anyone of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection, without hesitation. I asked then, why you sent for me? And Cornelius said, 4 days ago, about this hour, I was praying in my house about the 9th hour, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing and said, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard and your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for one Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging there in the house of Simon, a tanner by the sea. So I sent for you at once, and you have been kind enough to come. Now therefore, we are all here in the presence of God to hear what you have been commanded by the Lord." Tomorrow, we hear what he had to say. Behold, the word of the Lord.